Now let's look at some additional features of the if statement. I'm going to start with this example, and I'm just leaving in all of our nice relational operators here in the comments for easy reference. What I want to do this time is something that's pretty simple. I just want to compare two numbers to see if if one is greater than the other, or if they're or if they're equal to each other. So let's put some code here for that, and we're going to input the numbers. So let's just suppose we have a variable num1 and a variable num2, and we're just going to prompt ourselves to type in numbers from the keyboard. So we'll enter the first number and we'll enter the second number. So now we're just going to use if statements to determine which of those numbers is the larger. And I'm going to show you several different methods that we can use for that. So let's just start with the first one, and we'll write the information back out to the screen so we can keep up with which method we're using. So here is method number 1. We'll print that to the screen. And then it's pretty simple. We just have our if statement, and we'll print out the larger of the two. So if num1, here's the if statement, okay, if num1 is greater than num2, then we'll print num1 is the larger value. Well, since we only have two numbers, then we can now test to see if num2 is the larger using a very similar if statement. So we can paste that in here, and now we've got the answer we need. Okay, so if num1 is larger than num2, okay, if that one's true, we'll print out num1's the larger value. If num2 is bigger than num1, then we'll print out that num2 is a larger value. So here we have two separate if statements to test the condition to see which number is larger. Now we're not considering if they're equal just yet. Now let's test the program with only this much code. So let's look at the output. So now we're being prompted. Okay, type in the first number. We'll keep it simple. Let's make the first number 4. And type in the second number. Let's make the second number 2. So num1 will be the larger of the two numbers in this case. So when I hit enter, we're going to be working with method 1, and we see that 4 is the larger value. Now in this case, which of the if statements was true and which one was false? All right, so first number was larger. All right, so num1 greater than num2. This is the one that was true. So we did print out num1 is a larger value, so we printed out 4. This one is false. Okay, num2 is smaller than num1, so we didn't print out this statement here. All right, now let's consider another method in which we can do the same thing, and we're going to look at a different clause that we can use with these if statements. But before we do that, let's try something else. Let's run the program again. Let's just run it, and let's see what happens if we type in the numbers that are both the same. So let's type in 4, and let's type in 4. I hit enter. Then you see nothing comes out. Okay, we get method 1 printed to the screen, but we don't get which number is larger. And that's because they're equal. And since the numbers are equal, both of these if statements is false. Num1 greater than num2, that's false. So we don't print out that statement. Num2 greater than num1, that's false as well. So we don't print out anything here either. So if we wanted to catch the condition where they're equal, then we'd need to add one more statement. So I kind of got ahead of myself there. I wanted to show you this. So we need to put in another if statement like that to see if they're equal. So in this case, if num1 is equal to num2, then that would be true, and we'd print out the numbers are the same. Okay, so now let's run the program again, and we'll type in numbers that are the same, and you'll see that this statement will be true, and we'll print out that the numbers are the same. These other two are going to be false, so we don't get those outputs. So now we can type in the information. So let's type in the same numbers again. Let's type in 4 for the first number, 4 for the second number, and you'll see now the output says the numbers are the same. So now we have taken care of all possibilities. Either num1 is larger, or num2 is larger, or they're the same. So we have 3 simple if statements to detect each of those possible conditions. Now let's look at a different method, and let's introduce something else about the if statement. Method 2, and we're going to add something called the else clause. Okay, so we'll print method number 2 to the screen, and now let's look at the if statement for that. So we'll start out and it'll look the same to begin with. So let's paste the first part of that in, and let's check the number 1 and against number 2. Okay, so if num1 is larger than num2, then num1 is the larger value. Okay, so that's fine. Now, if we're not worried about the case where they're equal to each other, then we could use an else clause here, just ELSE, and remember that we need to add our colon after that. Then we could print out that num2 is the larger value. So let's put that here, and let's examine this statement, and these all have to line up again. So notice what we have. We have an else clause here. And the way that works is as follows. If num1 is larger than num2, if this is true, we print out num1 is a larger value. And if we're not considering the possibility where they're equal, then if this turns out to be false, we print out that part of it. So you can write your if statement like this. So if your result is true, you do, let me highlight that better. If this result, that comparison, that relational expression, if it evaluates to true, then you do that part. If it evaluates to false, then you do the other part that falls down here under the else clause. So we can use else as kind of a catch-all, and I'll show you another example of that coming up. But this is a handy thing to use, and we didn't have to have an explicit test after the else. It's just that if the expressions turned out to be false above it, then this is the one that is executed. So now let's run our program, and we can look at method number 2 and see what kind of output we get. So we'll bring over the output window, and we'll enter the first number. Now in method number 2, I'm not testing for equal, so I don't need to put equal numbers this time. So let's have the first number is 4, and let's have the second number larger this time with 6, and then I'll hit enter. Okay, so in method 1, we found out that 6 is larger. Method 2, we found out that 6 is larger. But in method 2, we used the else clause down here. Okay, so num1 greater than num2, well, that's wrong this time, isn't it? Because we know that the second number is larger. So this one failed, so we got the else statement to execute and printed out that num2 is the larger value. Okay, so that's how we got that. So here we go. 6 is the second number. That's a larger number. Now, let's do another example or another method, and we'll look at a third way that we can find out the larger of two numbers. So let's put a comment here. And this is going to be method number 3, and it's got this weird thing, elif. What's an elif? All right, well, we'll find out shortly. So this is method number 3. We'll start out the same way. So we'll have our if statement that starts the same way as the others. Okay, so if num1 is larger than number 2, then number 1 is the larger value. Okay, now we can code up the second part of this instead of a separate if statement. Then we can put what we call an else if in here. So let's explain what's going on there. Now here is the second thing or second new thing with your if statement. So else is a clause you can use, and you can also use this thing here. It's called an else if, but it's contracted to ELIF. So remember the way that you have to type that. Then what this is saying is as follows. If num1 is greater than num2, then we'll do that. Else if num2 is greater than num1, then we'll do this. All right? So you can have as many of these else if statements as you want. So let's put one more in for the case when they're equal. Okay, so we could do another elif. So I'll just copy that one and paste it down here. And let's back that up a little bit. Else if num2 is equal to num1, then we could put in that they are equal to each other or the numbers are the same. So let's get this print statement from up there. We'll copy it and we'll paste it down here. Okay, so I'll make sure that everything aligns. The indentation needs to be the same. So here now is another technique that you can use with your if statements. So this, once again, if num1 is greater than num2, if that's true, you do that. If this is false, you move down to the next test. Else if num2 is greater than num1. If that one is true, you do the code that follows it. If it is false, then you move on and you test the next one. So this is a way to give you a sequence of if tests, and it's similar to what we did up here with just 3 simple if statements, but it's a little bit more concise to write it like this. And I'll look at another example coming up that will explain this further. So here is just another way to do this, and it illustrates how to use the else if clause of an if statement. So now let's run the program and let's test out method number 3. Our window is up so we can type in some values. So we're going to start to get a lot of output from this thing. So let's enter the first number and we'll make it smaller again. And the second number we'll make it 8 again. So now the second number is larger. So for method 1, we got 8. Method 2, we got 8. Method 3, we get 8. So these are just 3 equivalent ways that we can use to find the larger of 2 numbers. And the whole purpose of this is to illustrate the various parts of the if statement. So we get the same thing. Now, in a couple of cases here, we have tested for equality. So let's run the program without any changes. We'll do it one more time. And let's input some values that are the same. Okay, so I'll run the module again. So now let's put in 2 numbers that are the same. So let's put in 7, and we'll put in 7, and we'll hit enter. And here, method 1, we get the numbers are the same. Okay, so that's because we had the explicit if statement. If num1 equals num2, the numbers are the same. We print that out. Okay, in method number 2, we have 7 is a larger value. All right, well, what's going on there? Well, the thing that's going on there is we didn't test for equality in method number 2. If num1 is greater than num2, we printed out the larger value. Else, we didn't test for anything. Okay, so we printed out that num2 is a larger value. So the thing that happened here in method number 2 is num1 greater than num2, that was false. And since that was false, we went ahead and did the else part, and we didn't test to see if it was equal. So method number 2 isn't going to give us what we want. Okay, so we need to be aware that that's not going to work when we have 2 numbers that are equal. But number 3 does just fine. Okay, if num1 is greater than num2, well, that's false, so we don't print that out. Else, if num2 is greater than num1, well, that's false too. Okay, so we don't print out num2 is a larger value. Else, if num2 equals num1. Okay, now we're in business. Because they are equal, that's true. We print out the numbers are the same. So then we have what we wanted for that. So here then are 3 ways that we can test to see if 2 numbers or if one is larger than the other, or in some cases if they're equal. Now let's look at another way that we can go about this. So I'm going to paste in yet another example. So let's put that here. And this is method number 4. So it's very similar to 3, but I've made one small change. So I'm going to call this the else if dash else clause. So let's look at how I've changed that. The only thing I changed was that last line. And let's look at what I did. So if num1 is greater than num2, we print out num1's larger. Else, if number 2 is greater than number 1, we print out that num2 is the larger. Now, if both of those are false, then the only possibility is that the numbers are the same. So I can use the else statement here instead of testing with another else if. So this example shows you the 3 ways, or the 3 things you can do with an if. Okay, we always start an if statement with a single if. You can have as many else if clauses as you need, and you can have one and only one else at the end if you need it. So here is the 4th way that we could write the program that would detect if the numbers are larger than each other or if they're equal to each other. So here's method number 4. So let's give that a try. Let's run the program to make sure that it works. We have the output screen again, so let's bring that over. And this time I want to put in two numbers that are equal. So let's use 5 and let's use 5. We'll hit enter. And now you see in method number 4, the numbers come out the same. Method number 3, the numbers come out the same as well. So that gives us what we want, but this shows you that there are two ways you can write it. Okay, we could use the if, else if, or we could use if, else if with a single else at the bottom. And it's up to you. It doesn't really matter which way you go about this, even if you use 3 simple if statements without any other clauses, that still gives you the correct answer. And it's up to you as a programmer of which choice you want to use. Which one is your favorite? Which one would you prefer? They are going to give you the same result. But behind the scenes now you have these really 3 good methods to test to see if they're greater than or equal. And we've got one here if we've just got 2 numbers that are, we just got tests for 2 numbers that are not equal to each other. So that would take care of that one. So it's not the number 2 is not the best one for you to use if you have equal numbers. Now, let's do one more thing with that. All right, so let's take this example that we had up here, the one that didn't give us what we wanted. And let's change that so that we can detect values that are equal to each other. So let's look at the code for that. So I'll paste this in. And what I'm using here is I've really gone back to the very first example we did, where we had the simple if statements. But now let's modify those so that we can also test to see if the numbers are equal to each other. And we only use 2 if statements instead of the 3 that we had up here. So we don't need to have this actual test to see if num1 is equal to number 2. That's going to be included with a greater than or an equals here. Okay, so instead of using just a greater than, I'm going to add the equals onto this. So this is going to test if num1 is greater than or equal to number 2. Then we'll print out that num1 and we'll say is larger or equal. And if num2 is greater than num1, then we'll print out that num2 is larger or equal. So in this case, it's going to be it's going to work a little differently. So it's going to detect if the numbers are larger or if they're equal to each other. So let's run the program again and let's test method number 5. So now we have the output window and we can input values. So let's put equal numbers in again. So in this case, let's have 9 and have 9. And method number 5. Okay, so let's look at that one. That's the one we just put in, and let's see why we get the value 9 out twice. Well, we have 2 simple if statements. If num1 is greater than or equal to num2, okay, that's going to be true. Okay, 9 is equal to 9, so that we get the first line printed here. Then we move down to the next if statement. That one is also true if the numbers are equal. So we get a second output of the same thing. So these last 2 lines are going to give us a result if the numbers are equal, but they're going to give us 2 of them, and we probably don't want that. So that illustrates, though, that you can use a greater than or equals here instead of just a greater than sign, and that's another way that you can handle situations where the 2 numbers are equal. Now I want to do one more example before we stop this video, and it's going to illustrate the else if as well as the else clauses of the if statement. So this example is going to be one where we determine the day of the week based on a number from 1 through 7. So we're going to print the day of the week, and we're going to prompt ourselves to enter a number 1 through 7 that represents the day of the week. So remember, we have to convert that to an integer if we want to use it as a number. Otherwise, it's going to be considered to be a string. And we'll save that in day. All right, now how do we test that to see if to determine what day it is in terms of if it's a Sunday, Monday, or so on? We want the name of the day. So let's start out with our if statement like this. Okay, we'll paste that in. So if day is equal to 1, then we'll print out Sunday. So we'll just go along with the calendar, which shows the Sunday is the first day of the week. Then we continue to do this for all of the other days of the week. So we can use the else if clause, and we just put that here. And we can test to see if day is 2. If that's true, then we print out Monday. And we continue to do this for the remainder of the week. So let's look at the rest of those else if statements. We just copy and paste those in here. And there you have them. So now we have a sequence of else if statements. So if day is 1, we print out Sunday. Else if day is equal to 2, we print out the word Monday. Else if day is 3, we print out Tuesday. So we just have this series of else if statements for every day of the week. Now remember, we use the double equals. It's easy to make a mistake there and only put 1, but you need to use 2 if you're comparing things. Now I want to add an extra little test to this. What if we accidentally have an input that's not 1 through 7? Well, that would be an error, wouldn't it? So if I put in 9 or if I put in 13, then there's no day that corresponds to that. So my program is going to accommodate that though. So I'm going to close out this if statement by putting in an else clause. And at the bottom, it's going to be else print error. Please enter a value between 1 and 7. So now let's look at this. The input that comes in, if it's a number between 1 through 7, then the if statement followed by the else if statements, one of those will be true, and we'll print out the day of the week. So for example, if it's 4, then this one would be true, and we'd print out Wednesday. All the other ones would be false. If we have the day as 8 or 9, then all of these are going to be false because we don't have a day that matches 9. So all of those will be false. And because they are, if everything above it is false, the else statement executes. So this is kind of an error check. It's kind of a catch-all. So if a number is input that's not 1 through 7, then the else statement will execute and will print out error. Please enter a value from 1 through 7. All right, so here is a longer example then, and it illustrates all the parts of the if statement. We always start out with a single if in the beginning. Then you can have as many of these else if statements that you want. Let's put that back over. You can have as many else ifs as you want, and then you can even put in a single else at the bottom if you need to, and you can only have one of these else statements. So here's an example then that shows you all the parts of the if statement. Let's run the program and let's test out the day of the week part. So now I've got the program running, and I've entered the numbers for the first part of this, so we'll skip on down to the day of the week. So now, let's make that a little bigger. Okay, so now we need to enter a number representing the day of the week. All right, so let's enter the number 5. Okay, so we enter 5, and that turns out, okay, that's Thursday. So this is the part of that if statement that's true. Else, if day is equal to 5, which it is, then we print out Thursday. So the first one, day 1, that's false. Day 2 is false, and so on. So we keep going till we find one that's true. Okay, day equals 5, and then we print that out. Now, the other thing that happens here with your else if sequence is after it finds a condition that's true, it doesn't check these other conditions at all. Okay, so you need to remember that, and we'll look at that coming up as well. Okay, now let's test it again, and let's put in an erroneous value. So I'm going to run the same program. We'll just run it, start all over again. I need to type in numbers for the first part of this, so I'll type in 8 and 9. And now let's type in a number that's a erroneous value for the day of the week. So I'll put 9 in for that. And look, okay, we get error. Okay, please enter a value from 1 through 7. So in this test, all of these if statements failed. Okay, it's not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's none of those. And because all of them are false, the else statement picked up that condition, and it printed out the error statement here at the bottom. All right, so let's bring that back up. And that's why you see the result here. Okay, so we type in a 9, then we get an error message because of that. So there you have it. Here then we have several examples that show you how you can use the if statement. Okay, the if statement always starts with if, and you can have as many else if statements. Beware of the spelling. It's E-L-I-F. I'm tempted to write E-L-S-E-I-F a lot of times, but it's not. It's E-L-I-F. And you can have as many of those as you want, including none. And if you want to use the else, then it goes at the bottom and you can only have one of those. There you go. There's a summary of our if statement. So we'll stop the video here.